Red alert, red alert. Is it time to push the panic button on the Devils this season this early? And also, what did Lindy Ruff say about the defensive execution for the Devils in the previous matchup against the Jets? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. In today's episode, we're going to look back at the Devils' defensive execution because head coach Lindy Ruff had something positive to say about the defensive execution in the previous matchup against the Winnipeg Jets. Then in the second segment, we're going to ask the most important question that's been making its way throughout Devils discourse, which is, should Devils fans be worried? Because currently, the Devils are on a 3-game losing streak. They've been outscored 16-8 during those recent games. Now, 8 goals is significant, and that should be good enough to win those said games. But letting up 16 goals, that's what's been the concern for most people. And 2 of those 3 games were at the hands of 6-3 losses for New Jersey. Then in the third and final segment, we're going to revisit a topic that I've brought up so many times during my tenure of being the host of Locked On Devils, which is, should Lindy Ruff be on the hot seat? Now, there's a reason why I saved that to the third and final segment because I am tired of repeating myself. But once again, it's making its way throughout social media. So let me give you guys some insight as to why Lindy Ruff, more likely than not, will remain the Devils head coach through thick and thin and thin and thinner. But let's begin with what he had to say post-game in regards to the Devils' defensive execution, because a lot of people, including myself, had their opinions about how the Devils were somewhat lackadaisical on the defensive end. I highlighted 3 of the 6 goals that they let up to the Jets, and I said, those were killers for the Devils. But here's what Lindy Ruff had to say during his post-game press conference.
What are your thoughts on your team's D-zone coverage today?
On ours?
Yeah.
Thought it was good.
Short, simple, to the point. Now, I want to give Lindy the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if he was being genuine, sarcastic, wherever the case might be, because having spoken to Lindy before, like every other coach, he's not really the biggest fan of speaking to the media, but he'll play ball. He's not obnoxious or anything. So I think he was trying to end his post-game press conference because, in my opinion, there's nothing more intimidating than having to speak with a player or a coach after a loss, especially on a losing streak, because no one is in a good mood. Everyone is frustrated. So you think you as a fan is frustrated with this team? Well, guess what? The players are actually playing in the game. No one's more frustrated than them. Trust me. So I don't know if Lindy was being genuine or not, but let's just say hypothetically he wasn't. Now, I always give this disclaimer whenever I go against Ruff and what he says. I am not a coach. I am not a general manager. This is just from my perspective, and I'm not trying to come at him in any which sort of way. But the one thing that I highlighted in the previous episode is that when I look at some of the goals that the Devils let up, I think the main thing I have to highlight is just poor rebound control, because if we look at the first 2 goals they let up in period 2, those goals could have been avoided had the Devils just tried to rebound the puck a little bit better. So when we see Connor score and then when we see Perfetti score on the power play, it's just like if the Devils just collect the puck and just try to clear it and get out of their defensive end, then those goals wouldn't have happened. And as a result of their poor rebound control, they're constantly scrambling. So I mentioned this in the previous episode, which is the Devils defense scrambles so much to try to regain control of their bearings. They look like a bunch of military fire jets out there, or they're just like scrambling eggs. Like they cannot regain control and try to stay calm, cool, and collected. And then another thing that I want to highlight is that I've been seeing a lot of defensive end turnovers. So specifically, I saw Jonas Siegenthaler blow a tire while on the PK after Curtis Lazar got his penalty that put the Devils shorthanded. And as a result, the Jets were able to collect the puck, and Connor got his second goal of the game, and it was on the power play. So that's something else that I said like needs to be worked on, which is the Devils have to clean up the puck a little bit better. It's not just the defensemen, but ever since Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier went down with injuries, I've seen less fumbles in a football game. The Devils just constantly fumble the puck. It's just like a game of hot potato, and it's just like so excruciating to see because it's just like it's like a slippery slope with them. They cannot get control of the puck on their stick. They can't make tape-to-tape passes, and as a result, they put themselves into great danger when they turn the puck over. And then the big thing is just poor communication. So I look back as soon as the Devils tied the game, thanks to a great goal by John Marino, Dougie Hamilton and Luke Hughes had a defensive lapse in which both of them had poor communication, and both of them were on the far side corner. Nobody is manning the near side, the left side in this case for the Devils, and it's just like that was a recipe for disaster, and that left them greatly exposed. And Ehlers saw that, and he was able to score easily on an open net attempt on Akira Schmid because Schmid had his body turned towards the puck, and once he realized that he was in danger, it was too little too late. So the one thing that I could say for Lindy Ruff is that the defensive execution was not great in the previous game against the Jets, at least from my perspective. Now, I want to give Lindy the benefit of the doubt, which is a change is necessary, but he's kind of in a sticky situation. So when we look at the current defenseman for the Devils, I know I was giving them crap in the previous episode, and I was giving them crap just moments ago, but a lot of these defensemen can do great things. So like Luke Hughes and Dougie Hamilton, that's an offensive dynamic unit that I'm sure that a lot of teams would like to have, but both of them are not good defensively. And then Yoda Sigathar and John Marino, they're supposed to be lockdown defensemen. Kevin Ball, he has a lot of upside. We were raving about his skating ability in the preseason. And then Brendan Smith is just Brendan Smith. The one thing I could say about Smith is that he's not afraid to throw his body around. He's not afraid to take off the mitts. He's not afraid to rack up the hits. So he does play physical, sometimes to his own discredit because he does get a lot of penalties. But digressing a little bit, this defensive unit for the Devils, while it might not be the best in the NHL, it definitely has some potential. But the thing is that the Devils have been rocking with these same defensemen since opening night. There's literally been no change in terms of subbing someone in or out. So what needs to happen? Well, Colin Miller is on the road with the Devils. He recently participated in a practice for New Jersey. He was taken off the IR, and we're just waiting to see if maybe Lindy Ruff will sit Brendan Smith for a couple games, get Miller in there, and some people are even pushing for Shimon Nemets to be brought up. But I think the main issue for the Devils is that they're lacking depth on the defensive end, which is why I was actually big on the Devils potentially getting Nikita Zadorov because he recently demanded a trade out of Calgary. So the one thing I can say is like at least Zadorov, regardless of what you think of him, he can add some more depth for New Jersey. So I think that's what's been the biggest issue for the Devils is that I'm sure Lindy would like to make a change to his defensive unit. It's greatly needed, especially when we're seeing like the turnovers, the poor communication, the rebound control. I'm sure Lindy sees it and he is well aware. There's a reason why he's been in the league for like ever. But the problem is like, what changes can he potentially make? He's really spread thin in terms of defensemen, and he's kind of in a sticky situation. So I'm just hoping that Colin Miller is good to go in the game against the Penguins, similar to hopefully Jack Hughes. So that way we can see a shake of things. So that way the Devils' defense can possibly improve a little bit. Now, people have their mixed emotions about Colin Miller because they saw him during preseason, and I'm definitely no exception. Colin Miller was a turnover machine during preseason. There's no denying. But the one thing I want to give Miller credit for is like, yes, the end of his Dallas Stars tenure was not all that good. He was consistently a healthy scratch while the Stars were participating in the playoffs. But here's something that he did last year, or here's a few things he did last year. So he suited up in 79 games. He had 6 goals, 15 assists for a grand total of 21 points. He had a 4.6 defensive point share, which ranked 4th on Dallas's roster. He had 108 hits, which ranked 5th on the roster. He had 70 blocks, which ranked 5th on the roster. And he had a plus minus of plus 23, which also ranked 5th on the roster. So Miller actually does have some capabilities of being a decent defenseman. And I think you do need to give him a chance, at least in regular season. So that way, maybe we can see a different defensive outcome for the Devils, because the reality is that we're seeing this defense for the Devils just crash and burn game after game after game. And there's not really much that Lindy can do in terms of making changes. The only thing he can do is just shake up the lines. And I saw a comment in the previous video saying, like, no, keep the defensive pairings as they are. Let them form some chemistry. Well, the thing is that Lindy has tried that and it doesn't work. Honestly, I don't think it would make an ounce of difference. He's tried like a lot of things during practice, during a game, but the end result is that this defensive unit for the Devils, they need a big shakeup. Now, could they bring up Shimon the Mets? Possibly, but who would you send down? That's definitely a big question. And I just think that once the Devils get more depth, once they get Colin Miller back and possibly look at the trade market, I think the defensive unit is going to improve. So in regards to Lindy Ruff's comments saying that he felt like the defensive execution was good for New Jersey, I wholeheartedly disagree, respectfully, but I understand the situation that he's in, and it's just the hand he's being dealt with. Now, we're going to transition to, like, should Devils fans be concerned, and we're going to look at some other big changes that could be on the horizon for the Devils. But before we continue, I want to tell you guys about sleepers. So I'm in the midst of my fantasy football season, but obviously you guys know I am big in hockey, and I think you guys will be big in fantasy hockey too. So a new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. So the Devils could hoist the Stanley Cup, or Jack Hughes could score 50 goals, and you could still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL. So you don't just have to stick with the NHL. Fans can also play daily fantasy football, basketball, baseball, college football on Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Tyler Toffoli, Vitek Vanecek will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Devils fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so that way you can start winning big, 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 big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Okay, so I was listening to a recent episode of Let's Go Devils podcast, and Sam Wu and Nick Villano had a special guest. They had James Nichols, who's a friend of my show, and he is a Devils beat reporter for New Jersey Hockey Now. And basically the main talking point during the episode was that should Devils fans be concerned? And they asked James that question. And James responded by saying, like, not really, because there's a lot of underlying stats. There's a lot of advanced analytics. There's other metrics to the Devils that they're not going to be given credit for. Now, I do agree with James, and he's absolutely right, because I don't think the scoreboard does it justice for the Devils. And I'll talk about where my frustrations lie with the team momentarily. But as we all know, if you're very active on the X app, James always puts out the deserve to win-o-meter post-game. In the previous matchup for the Devils against the Jets, the deserve to win-o-meter fell into the favor of the Devils. Now, before I put it up on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, take a guess as to what that number was. Well, I'm going to tell you this. You are incorrect, because according to deserve to win-o-meter, Devils win 65.8% of the time after 1,000 game simulations. Now, a lot of people might be a little confused about it, but it goes back to what James was saying on the Let's Go Devils podcast, which is like the Devils, the scoreboard doesn't do it justice for them. And I even backed up James on the X app, and I said it makes sense because offensively the Devils create great looks for themselves, but they can't finish, because according to MSG, going into the matchup, the Devils' expected goals for was 3.28, which ranked second in the NHL, and their goals for was 2.10, which was 27th in the NHL. And when we look at the differential, it is minus 1.18, which is dead last in the NHL. So the thing is, like, when we look at the numbers, the Devils are actually playing somewhat decent hockey for spurts of the game. Now, a lot of you are probably going to say, like, well, Trey, didn't you give the Devils an F in the previous matchup against the Jets? Yes, you are absolutely correct, and I stand by it. But What frustrates me the most about this Devils team, especially these last 3 games, is that once again, they show spurts of dominance. Like they show spurts of a team that we know is capable of potentially going to the playoffs and competing. But the problem is they make so many ill-advised mistakes at the wrong possible time. So I said it in the top of the episode, which is the Devils are once again on a 3-game losing streak. And during those 3 games, they are outscored 16-8. 8 goals should be significant for any team to win during a 3-game stretch, because last Tuesday they lost to the Avalanche 6-3. Then a few nights later against the Capitals, they lost 4-2. And then in the previous matchup against the Jets, they once again lost 6-3. Now, when we look at those previous 3 matchups, the game was competitive against the Avalanche for like the first 2 periods. And I was just in disbelief as to how the Devils were able to maintain a tie after 2 periods. Because if I am being completely honest with you, if this was the same Devils team from a couple years ago, then they would be losing like 10-3 or something like that, because the Devils were just a cat with 9 lives. Like they had a lengthy power play at one point. Yes, they gave up a shorthanded goal to Miles Wood during that lengthy power play, but they scored 2 power play goals as a result. So once again, their power play was really good, but it's just like there's no way that game should have been tied after the first 2 periods. And anyone who saw that game will back me up on that. That was very hard to watch. And then in the game against the Capitals, the Devils allowed 3 unanswered goals, and the Capitals were heading into the final period of regulation with a 3-0 lead. But then the Devils caught fire. They scored 2 unanswered goals, and they're desperately trying to tie the game. But then the Capitals get the empty netter, and they put the game to bed. And then this previous game against the Jets, the Devils tie it up 2-2. But then a couple minutes later, like 2 minutes later, Luke Hughes and Dougie Hamilton had a costly mistake that shifted the momentum back into the Jets' favor. So that's just the one thing that frustrates me about the Devils, which is sometimes it's right there for them. They don't know how to finish, or they just constantly make mistakes that come back to bite them, and it's at the wrong possible time. I know it's very generic of me to say that, but anyone who's seen these games the last few nights, you can back me up on that 100%. So my overall thing is, should Devils fans be concerned about the team for a time being? My answer is no. It's still relatively early in the season, but they do need to get their act together, because unlike last season, the Devils don't really have a points cushion to work with, because obviously last year they went on a 13-game win streak, and this time around they are slipping in the Metropolitan Division, and their next game is against the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are currently on a win streak. And we saw old man Sidney Crosby net a hat trick. So the Devils really need to get their act together. And one of the big changes that the Devils are going to make, in fact, there's 2 big changes, that Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes are slated to return sooner rather than later. Now, obviously, Jack Hughes is projected to make his return before Nico Hischier, but those are 2 big changes that the Devils are heavily relying on, because like I said moments ago, when we look at the numbers, the Devils are still creating good looks for themselves, and we saw that on full display to begin period 3 against the Jets, which is the Devils were a lot more aggressive. They were a lot faster. They were forechecking the hell out of the Jets. They were creating good looks on Connor Hellebuck. They just could not capitalize on those opportunities, and I think getting Jack Hughes back into the lineup will definitely help, and then getting a 2-way player like Nico Hischier will definitely do wonders for them. So to answer everyone's question, I don't think anyone should be concerned for the Devils for the time being, because they're missing their 2-star players. And yes, they still have a lot of kinks to work out, even when they get Hischier and Hughes back, which is they need to fix their defense, but getting Colin Miller also added into the lineup might help things. They could go to Shimon the Mets, but I don't know how much the Mets will be a help defensively. He's an offensive-minded defenseman, so I wouldn't try to put all that trust into the Mets. Basically, the Devils have some holes to fill, and they're still trying to figure it out. So the goaltending is going to have to get sorted out, but the defensively, they're missing Damon Severson and Ryan Graves. Ryan Graves was the silent but deadly ninja, as I like to call him, because he just knew how to play effective minutes on the top 4 without generating a lot of points, or maybe getting his name into the scorebook all that often. And then for Damon Severson, he took a back seat. He took a bottom 4 defensive role, and the advanced analytics showed that Severson was actually playing some very good minutes out there. So I think for New Jersey, it's just a matter of like, how are they going to replace those veteran type players with some young players like Luke Hughes? So I'd say the Devils, for the time being, they're just going through some growing pains. And right now, obviously, it's hard to amount a historic season. I didn't anticipate for the Devils to like top what they did last year, but I think I did expect a better start. Obviously, some circumstances haven't really gone their way. But the one thing I got to say is that Nico and Jack will be big help offensively, and the Devils will score a lot more goals. But you got to stop some of those goals. And I think it starts with like getting a new body into that defensive rotation to see if maybe that said player, Colin Miller, can be a spark for New Jersey. So once again, I agree with what Nick Villano, Sam Wu, and James Nichols talked about in a recent episode of Let's Go Devils podcast, which is still relatively early. Remember, the Devils were not good in the month of December last year, and they turned it around quickly before the halfway mark. I think it's better to have these issues early, but I think the Devils are right now trying to weather the storm with missing their 2-star players, and I think better days are ahead. Not going to guarantee anything, but I think better days are ahead. So we're going to talk about Lindy Ruff and his job security momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you guys about Jase Medical. So don't be caught unprepared. Everyone should be entitled to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase handles everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. So you know the drill. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. So if you or someone you love would like some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily medications, go to jasemedical.com to see what they have to offer to you. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Okay, so to close out this episode, we're going to revisit a topic that I have discussed heavily on this show the last few years. I guess being a Jack Adams finalist isn't good enough for the Devils fan base, but people are wondering, should Lindy Ruff be on the hot seat? Like if the Devils, I'd say if they continue to struggle or if they just fall underneath expectations, people are once again pushing for Lindy to be fired. It's like, fire Lindy, sorry Lindy, all over again. But I've highlighted 3 things as to why that might not happen. Reason number 1 is his contract. So this is the final year of his original deal. And remember, he has a multi-year extension that kicks in next season. How long is it? I don't really know. My educated guess is 2 to 3 years. So Lindy Ruff and his new contract kind of hindered that a little bit. Number 2, the players speak highly of him, particularly the star player, Jack Hughes, who I'll talk about momentarily. But the thing is that during exit interviews a few months back, every player had nothing but positive things to say about Lindy Ruff and the coaching staff and their game planning and their execution. So if the players really wanted Lindy Ruff gone, he would have been gone already. That's something I've just hammered time in and time out. Nico Hischier speaks fondly of him. Jesper Bratt speaks fondly of him. So it's just like, if your star players are satisfied with a system that they're comfortable with, and I think Lindy Ruff and what he's been doing for the Devils, at least offensively, I think it's been really good for New Jersey. So if, as my buddy Jersey Joe would say, for the defensive execution, you really need to hold Ryan McGill accountable. So that's my thing, which is I think Lindy Ruff is the right man to lead the Devils for the time being. And if the players really wanted him gone, he would have been gone by now. Case in point, this is a very old example, but this is a shout out to all you old school Devil fans. Remember back in 2000, before the start of the playoffs, the Devils decided to fire Robbie Ftorek, and then they promoted Larry Robinson to the head coach position. Once again, just a few games before the start of the playoffs. Now, obviously, Lou Lamoriello is usually regarded as like the godfather of hockey, which is you really didn't want to piss him off or get in his way. He was harsh but fair, but the players that Robbie Ftorek were leading weren't really happy with his coaching style and also his decision-making. So I think the reports were saying that Ken Danico kind of led the charge on that, which prompted Lou Lamoriello to make the drastic decision to fire Fatorik just a few games before the start of the playoffs and then promote Larry Robinson to the head coaching position. And then the Devils ended up winning a Stanley Cup afterwards, but obviously there were some trial and tribulations, had to overcome a 3-1 deficit to the Philadelphia Flyers. But once again, just wanted to give a shout out to some of you old school Devil fans. But my thing is like the point I'm just trying to make is that if the players really wanted Ruff gone, he would have been gone already. And then the same could be said for Jack Hughes, because Jack Hughes, before the injury, he was really having a big year for New Jersey, and he could still very much do because he's still one of the top point getters in the NHL, and he could pick up right where he left off. But the one thing I could say about Jack Hughes is that he is really happy with Lindy Ruff. He loves how Lindy just trusts him, and it's done wonders for the Devils up to this point. So my thing is, like, I think people are looking for an easy fix. They're looking for not only an easy fix, they're looking for a quick fix. Look, growing pains are called growing pains for a reason, which is it takes time to grow, but it's not an easy road. It's going to, once again, it's going to be painful. There's going to be some turbulence, but how you rebound from it really makes the team. So the Devils have just hit a rough patch in their season, and they're going to have to straighten it out. But I don't think making a coaching change, especially when one of your star players is in the midst of having a very good year, is going to be the answer. Like I said, the Devils signed Lindy Ruff to an extension. I think Tom Fitzgerald is going to try to ride it through before he makes a bold decision to let go Lindy Ruff. So once again, I know the Devils have hit a rough patch, but it's the same discussion that people were having when the Devils got off to what? Like an 0-2 start to begin last year, or when the Devils were struggling in December. People were like, fire Lindy, get a new coach. And I'm just like, look, the Devils are going to struggle. Every good team goes through a struggle at some point. Some teams have a stress-free regular season, but then they crash and burn come the playoffs. The Boston Bruins are a good example of last year, but what do I know? So my thing is, like, the Devils are just in a rough patch and they're trying to get out of it, but it's hard for them to like really be all that good when you're missing your Hart caliber player in Jack Hughes and your Selke finalist in Nico Hischier. I think that will be tough for any team to try to overcome, because basically you have to change your whole system. You have to change your whole dynamic. You have to change your game plan, because the game plan revolves around those two players and their strengths. And obviously it was doing wonders for the Devils. That's not to say that everything is going to be peaches and cream once both of them return, but it makes things a little harder because the Devils, like I said in the previous segment and also the previous episode, they have a lot of kinks that they need to work out, especially defensively and goaltending wise. But the end all be all, I'm tired of discussing it, but since it was making its way around social media, I had to bring it up again. Lindy Ruff getting fired will not solve the Devils' problems at this very moment, because now you got to integrate a new coaching system. You got to integrate a new dynamic. Now that coach has to build chemistry with the team, and basically there's going to be some growing pains even further with that. Now the players got to get used to it, and maybe the Devils will end up losing, and then they're back to just counting down the days until the NHL draft. Do you really want that? Do you? So not everything is a quick, easy fix. Things take time. Growing pains, guys. Everything is going to be a process. You got to trust it. I know I'm impatient myself. I know I share my frustrations, but I'm not going to go that far and say that Lindy Ruff needs to be fired. Maybe that's the hill I'll die on. I don't know who's with me. I don't know who's against me, but that's my opinion. So I don't agree with everything Lindy Ruff does, but I don't think getting rid of him is the answer. He was a Jack Adams finalist just a few months back. Now you guys basically want to throw stones at him or something like that. That's my thought. So that's how I'm going to close out today's episode. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think about Lindy Ruff? What do you think about the changes that the Devils could potentially make on the defensive side of things? And are you concerned about the Devils? Let me know down in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.